Apparently, finding your husband's second life on his work laptop isn't what they mean by digital transformation. It was a Tuesday, August 19th, 2024. A perfectly unremarkable afternoon in our perfectly manicured suburban Philadelphia home. The kind of day where the biggest drama was whether John, my 12-year-old, would ever remember to put his dirty socks in the hamper, and if Olivia, my 9-year-old, would finally master her multiplication tables. My husband, Lawrence, 40, a senior account manager at some tech company downtown, was supposedly working from home in his makeshift office in the den, which, for the record, usually meant he was perfecting his golf swing on a virtual simulator while occasionally grunting into a headset. I was in the kitchen, attempting to bake a gluten-free, sugar-free, joy-free casserole for dinner, because, wellness. Lawrence had left his laptop open on the counter, probably to grab another artisanal coffee from our fancy espresso machine. A notification popped up, a little email preview. Nothing unusual, until I saw the sender, Brenda, and the subject line, "Thinking of you," and last night. My first thought? Oh, Brenda from HR. She's probably just sending a passive-aggressive reminder about mandatory diversity training. My second thought? Wait, last night? Did they have a late-night meeting about HR policies? My third thought, a cold, hard slap to the face. No, they did not. I clicked. Because, let's be real, who wouldn't? What followed was a masterclass in modern infidelity, delivered right to my unsuspecting eyeballs. It wasn't just thinking of you and last night. It was a whole damn novella. Pages and pages of nauseatingly saccharine exchanges, punctuated by emojis that made my stomach churn faster than Olivia on a roller coaster. "Can't stop thinking about our weekend getaway to the Poconos," one read. "Your smile lights up my cubicle," another gushed. "Counting down the minutes until our next client dinner," Brenda had written, followed by a winking face that made me want to throw the laptop across the room. My husband, Lawrence Dorsey, the man I'd shared a bed with for 15 years, the father of my 2 children, the guy who still occasionally left his wet towel on the bathroom floor despite my repeated pleas, was apparently leading a double life, and not even a cool double life, like a secret agent or a rock star. No, he was having a clandestine affair with Brenda from HR. Brenda, the woman who sends out the company newsletter with clip art. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. I stood there, casserole forgotten, the aroma of kale and quinoa suddenly feeling like a cruel joke. My brain, usually a well-oiled machine of PTA schedules and grocery lists, screeched to a halt. Then a different kind of thought started to bubble up. Not sadness, not even anger, not yet. Just a profound, almost scientific curiosity. How had I missed this? How had he managed this? And more importantly, how was I going to make sure everyone else knew about it? Because if Lawrence thought he could expand his social network to include an HR affair, then I was about to help him go viral. Internally, of course. For his company. You see, I'm April Dorsey, 38 years old, a former marketing whiz who traded boardrooms for carpool lines. I'm not the type to cry into a pint of Ben & Jerry's, though, for the record, I did eye the freezer for a hot second. No, I'm the type to strategize, to optimize, to ensure maximum reach and engagement. And right then, my target audience was Lawrence's entire professional ecosystem. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a cold, calculating calm. My hands, which had been trembling, steadied. I scrolled through more emails, screenshots of texts, even a few blurry photos from what looked suspiciously like a cheap motel in the Poconos. It was all there. A digital breadcrumb trail leading straight to the dumpster fire that was my marriage. I muttered to the empty kitchen. They say communication is key in a relationship, and clearly, Lawrence has been communicating a lot. My voice, usually soft, had a new edge to it, a sharpness I hadn't heard in years. It was the sound of a woman who had just found her new purpose. And that purpose wasn't to bake another gluten-free casserole. I wasn't looking for revenge, not in the petty sense. I was looking for clarity, for transparency, for a little bit of public accountability, Philly style. Lawrence had chosen to air his dirty laundry all over Brenda's inbox. I was just going to make sure the spin cycle reached everyone else. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:17 p.m. Lawrence would be back at his desk any minute, probably ready to circle back on some synergistic opportunities. Little did he know, I was about to create a synergistic opportunity of my own, one that involved his entire department, his boss, and probably even the janitorial staff knowing exactly what kind of team player he really was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The thought of what I was about to do sent a jolt through me, a mix of fear and exhilarating power. This wasn't just about me. This was about every woman who'd ever been blindsided, every wife who'd ever felt invisible. This was about turning a personal tragedy into a public service announcement. And I was just the woman to deliver it. Who needs a dramatic confrontation when you have the reply all button? I mused, a slow, wicked smile spreading across my face. The question wasn't if I would do it, but how to maximize the impact. How to make sure every single person in that office, from the overly enthusiastic Wendy Hackett to the perpetually gossiping intern, Kevin, got the full, unadulterated truth. This wasn't just an email. It was a carefully curated, highly targeted marketing campaign. And the product? Lawrence Dorsey, the two-timing, Poconos visiting, HR romancing hot mess. The first step was simple. Gather the evidence. I meticulously copied every incriminating email, every cringeworthy text, every blurry photo. I organized them into a neat little file, a digital dossier of deceit. It was like putting together a presentation for a client, except the client was the entire corporate world of Lawrence Dorsey, and the product was his shattered reputation. As I worked, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The initial sting of betrayal was still there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a fierce resolve. This wasn't about bitterness. It was about strategy. It was about taking control of a narrative that had been stolen from me, and I was going to write the hell out of it. "Oh, Lawrence," I whispered, closing the laptop with a soft click. "You just gave me the best content I've had in years." The game was on, and I was playing to win. The next morning, Wednesday, August 20th, 2024, dawned with a crisp, almost celebratory feel. The kind of day where you just know something big is about to happen. Lawrence, oblivious, was humming some terrible pop song while making his protein shake. He even gave me a peck on the cheek before heading out, muttering something about a big presentation today. "Oh, honey, you have no idea how big." I waited until the kids were safely off to school. John on his skateboard, Olivia skipping to the bus stop. Then, with a cup of lukewarm coffee and a heart rate that felt suspiciously normal, I opened Lawrence's laptop again. The dossier was ready. My fingers flew across the keyboard, crafting the email that would echo through the hallowed halls of his tech company. The subject line? Urgent. A special message from Lawrence Dorsey's home office. I wanted it to sound official, something no one would dare ignore. The body of the email was concise, professional, and utterly devastating. "Dear esteemed colleagues," I began, channeling my inner corporate drone. "It has come to my attention that some critical synergies and client relationships have been developing outside of standard business hours. As Lawrence Dorsey's wife of 15 years, I felt it was my duty to ensure full transparency within the organization, especially regarding team-building initiatives that might impact company culture." Then came the attachment. A perfectly organized PDF, titled, "Lawrence Dorsey, Unofficial Client Engagements and HR Partnerships." Inside, I'd compiled the most damning emails, the most explicit texts, carefully redacted for YouTube policy, of course, but the implication was crystal clear. And those blurry Poconos photos. I even included a little note at the end. "For further details, please contact Brenda from HR. She seems to have a comprehensive understanding of Lawrence's off-site activities." I took a deep breath. My finger hovered over the send all button. This wasn't just sending an email. It was launching a tactical missile. I imagined the collective gasp, the sudden silence in cubicles, the frantic whispers around the water cooler. It was going to be glorious. Click. And just like that, it was done. The digital equivalent of dropping a hand grenade into a quiet tea party. I closed the laptop, walked into the living room, and sat on the couch, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. It was like waiting for a really good train wreck to happen, knowing you were the one who set the tracks. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah, my best friend. "April, did you just send that email?" I grinned. "Oh, you got it?" "April, my husband works 2 floors below Lawrence. The entire office is on fire. Wendy Hackett just sent out an email titled Inspirational Thought of the Day, Integrity Matters, and it's clearly about Lawrence." I chuckled. Wendy. Always on brand. "And Kevin, the intern, he's apparently printing copies and handing them out like flyers for a rave." Sarah shrieked, a mix of horror and glee in her voice. "What did you do?" "I merely facilitated communication, Sarah," I replied, sipping my now cold coffee. "Lawrence always said he valued transparency. I just helped him achieve it." The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and texts. My phone was blowing up like it was Black Friday. Some calls were from genuinely concerned friends, some from mutual acquaintances who were clearly just fishing for gossip, and a few from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably people who'd gotten the email and were just curious about the woman behind the digital curtain. Lawrence came home that evening, looking like he'd been hit by a truck, then backed over by a steamroller, and then perhaps run through a car wash full of acid. His usually perfectly coiffed hair was disheveled, his tie was askew, and his face was a shade of puce I hadn't seen since he tried to assemble IKEA furniture by himself. "April!" he bellowed, throwing his briefcase onto the floor with a thud. "What in the name of all that is holy did you do?" I looked up from my book, a historical romance I'd been trying to get through for weeks. "Oh, hello, dear. Rough day at the office?" I asked, feigning innocence. "Did your big presentation not go well?" My big presentation was a company-wide email detailing my private life. He roared, his voice cracking. "Brenda is in HR, April. HR. She's threatening to sue me for emotional distress." I raised an eyebrow. Emotional distress? Interesting. I'm pretty sure that's my line, considering I just discovered my husband's secret Poconos getaway with Brenda from HR. Did she mention the part where she was sleeping with a married man? He sputtered, speechless for a moment. Where did you get those emails?" "Oh, you left your work laptop open, honey. It was practically begging me to take a peek. You know, curiosity killed the cat, but it also exposed a philandering husband. Trade-offs." I smiled sweetly. "My career is ruined. My reputation is in tatters," he wailed, running a hand through his hair. "Everyone knows. My boss called me into his office. He said it was a catastrophic breach of professional conduct." "Well, darling, you were certainly conducting yourself professionally, weren't you?" I retorted, closing my book. "Especially with Brenda. I hear her cubicle lights up when you smile." His face went from puce to a mottled purple. "This is insane. You're insane." "Am I?" I stood up, walking towards him. "Or am I just a woman who finally got tired of being gaslit? For 15 years, Lawrence, I've been the supportive wife, the PTA mom, the one who kept this suburban dream house running while you chased synergies and client relationships. Turns out, some of those relationships were a little too synergistic. The kids walked in then, home from school, oblivious to the emotional dumpster fire raging in the living room. "Mom, can I have a snack?" John asked, already heading for the pantry. Lawrence immediately straightened up, attempting to compose himself. "Hey, kids! How was school?" His voice was strained, like a bad actor trying to play a normal dad. I watched him, a sardonic smile playing on my lips. This was just the beginning. The email was merely the opening act. The real drama, the real humiliation, was yet to unfold. And I, April Dorsey, was ready for my starring role. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Lawrence tried to talk, to explain, to apologize. It was all a pathetic, poorly rehearsed performance. He tried to blame Brenda, then the stress at work, then even me for not being understanding. "You know, Lawrence," I said, cutting him off, "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you spin this into my fault. You made your bed, literally, with Brenda from HR. Now you get to lie in it. and I'm pretty sure the entire company knows exactly what kind of thread count you prefer." He flinched. The look on his face was priceless. Pure, unadulterated shame mixed with a healthy dose of fear. It was a beautiful sight, and it was just the gancho I needed to keep this story going. The days following the great email bomb of 2024 were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Lawrence, bless his heart, tried to salvage what was left of his professional life, but the damage was done. The whispers followed him like a bad cologne. His big presentation was indefinitely postponed. Brenda from HR. I heard through the grapevine, thank you, Sarah, and your husband's office gossip, had been reassigned to a remote position in a different state. Poor Brenda. Or not. Meanwhile, my life, which had been a quiet hum of domesticity, became a whirlwind of legal consultations and strategic planning. I wasn't just exposing him. I was dismantling our shared life, brick by painful, hilarious brick. One afternoon, while sifting through old financial documents for my divorce lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose dry wit almost matched mine, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold, then boil with a righteous fury. It wasn't just an affair. It was financial gaslighting. Hidden in a folder labeled Investment Opportunities Do Not Disturb were documents detailing a significant investment Lawrence had made in a shell company. A company that, upon closer inspection, seemed to be funneling money into an offshore account. And the beneficiary? Not me, not the kids, but a trust fund set up for a future dependent, dated just 6 months prior. My heart hammered against my ribs. A future dependent? Was Brenda pregnant? Or was this a contingency plan for a different secret family? The sheer audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. Lawrence wasn't just cheating. He was actively siphoning off our marital assets, planning a life that clearly didn't include me or our children. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a premeditated financial heist. Well, isn't that just a little ray of sunshine? I muttered, a dark chuckle escaping my lips. Turns out my husband wasn't just a two-timer, he was a full-blown financial architect of deceit. I immediately called Mr. Henderson. His calm, collected voice was a balm to my raging nerves. "April, this changes everything," he said, his tone serious. "This moves from a simple divorce case to one involving potential fraud and asset concealment. We can go after him for a lot more." My mind, always a few steps ahead, started whirring. This wasn't just about getting my fair share anymore. This was about poetic justice. Lawrence thought he was so clever, so discreet. He thought he could outsmart me, the stay-at-home mom who only worried about soccer practice and organic kale. Oh, how wrong he was. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady, "I want to make sure Lawrence Dorsey feels every single consequence of his actions, financially, socially, professionally. I want him to know what it's like to have his carefully constructed world crumble around him." "We can certainly aim for that, April," he replied, a hint of a smile in his voice. "We'll need to gather more evidence, but this is a very strong starting point." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, depositions, and late-night research. I became an expert in forensic accounting, offshore trusts, and the intricacies of Pennsylvania divorce law. I even started taking online courses in financial planning. Who knew betrayal could be so educational? Lawrence, meanwhile, was a hot mess. His company had placed him on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation into the breach of professional conduct, a fancy term for, "We know you're sleeping with HR and stealing company time." He tried to deny the offshore account, claiming it was a secret investment for our retirement. "Oh, really, Lawrence?" I deadpanned during one of our increasingly hostile meetings with our lawyers. "Because the trust fund explicitly states future dependent, not future retirement for April and the kids. Unless you're planning on retiring with Brenda and a love child in the Cayman Islands, I think we have a slight discrepancy here." His face, already pale from stress, went even whiter. He stammered, he blustered, he tried to change the subject. But Mr. Henderson, a pit bull in a Brooks Brothers suit, didn't let up. I found a perverse joy in watching him squirm. For years, I'd felt like I was walking on eggshells around Lawrence, trying to keep the peace, trying to maintain the illusion of our perfect suburban life. Now, I was cracking the eggs and making an omelet out of his misery. My friends, especially Sarah, were my rock. "You're a train wreck, April," Sarah told me over a much-needed glass of wine one evening. "But you're a magnificent train wreck, like a perfectly choreographed explosion." "Thanks," I said, clinking my glass against hers. "I'm just embracing my inner dumpster fire chic." I started making plans for my own future. With the kids growing up, I knew I couldn't stay a stay-at-home mom forever. I dusted off my old marketing portfolio, started networking, even considered launching my own consulting business. The betrayal, ironically, had given me a kick in the pants I didn't know I needed. It was like a forced sabbatical, but with more legal fees and less relaxation. The kids were surprisingly resilient. John, ever the pragmatist, mostly cared about whether his Xbox would still work after the divorce. Olivia, my little empath, was sad, but also curious. "Mommy, why did Daddy go to the Poconos with Brenda?" she asked one night. "Well, sweetie," I explained, trying to keep it age-appropriate, "Daddy made some very poor choices about who he spends his time with. And sometimes, when people make poor choices, there are consequences." "Like when I ate all the cookies before dinner?" she asked. "Exactly like that, honey," I replied, suppressing a laugh. Except Daddy's cookies were a lot more expensive. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, Lawrence became increasingly desperate. He tried to cut off my credit cards, freeze bank accounts. But I was always one step ahead thanks to Mr. Henderson and my newfound financial literacy. Every move he made, I countered. It was like a chess game, and I was finally playing to win. The biggest hurdle was the house, our beautiful suburban sanctuary. Lawrence wanted to sell it immediately, split the proceeds. But I knew it was the kids' home, their stability. And with the offshore account discovery, I had leverage. "He's trying to hide assets, April," Mr. Henderson advised. "If we can prove he was actively trying to defraud you, the court will look very unfavorably on him. We can push for a larger share of the marital estate, including the house." The thought of keeping the house, of giving my children a sense of continuity amidst the chaos, fueled my resolve. Lawrence thought he could walk away from our life, from his responsibilities, and start fresh with his secret stash and his HR fling. But I was about to show him that karma had a very detailed spreadsheet. This was no longer just about anger. It was about strategic dismantling. And the best part? He still had no idea how much I truly knew. The day of the final divorce hearing arrived, crisp and cold. Much like my feelings for Lawrence, I walked into the Philadelphia courthouse, head held high, wearing a power suit that screamed, "I mean business, and my business is taking everything you hold dear." Lawrence, on the other hand, looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot, and he kept nervously tugging at his tie. Brenda, thankfully, was nowhere in sight. Probably still in her remote HR bunker. The courtroom was surprisingly quiet, save for the rustle of papers and the low murmur of the judge. Mr. Henderson, my legal eagle, was a picture of calm confidence. Lawrence's lawyer, a slick-haired man named Mr. Thorne, looked perpetually annoyed. The hearing began, a tedious dance of legal jargon and financial disclosures. Lawrence, under oath, tried to downplay the affair, calling it a brief lapse in judgment. He tried to explain away the offshore account as a misguided attempt at a surprise investment for the family. It was all so transparently pathetic. Then it was our turn. Mr. Henderson, with the precision of a surgeon, laid out the evidence. The emails, the texts, the Poconos hotel receipts. Yes, I found those too, thanks to a little digital sleuthing and a very helpful private investigator. And then, the pièce de résistance, the detailed financial analysis of the offshore account, proving it was set up specifically to exclude me and the children, with a future-dependent clause that raised more than a few judicial eyebrows. "Your Honor," Mr. Henderson stated, his voice clear and firm, "Mr. Dorsey's actions demonstrate not just infidelity, but a deliberate and calculated attempt to defraud his spouse and children. This was not a lapse in judgment, but a systematic concealment of marital assets, designed to fund a new life at the expense of his family." Lawrence's face went from pale to ghostly. He looked like he was about to spontaneously combust. Mr. Thorne jumped up, objecting, but the judge, a stern-faced woman who looked like she'd seen it all, waved him down. "Mr. Dorsey," the judge said, her voice cutting through the tension, "the evidence presented here paints a very concerning picture. Your attempts to conceal assets are a serious matter. Given the egregious nature of your conduct, both personally and financially, I am ruling in favor of Ms. Dorsey." And then came the hammer blow. The judge awarded me the marital home outright, citing Lawrence's financial misconduct. She also granted me a substantial portion of his retirement accounts, as well as significant alimony and child support, far exceeding what I had initially hoped for. The offshore account? Frozen, pending further investigation, with the strong possibility of it being fully awarded to me and the children as punitive damages. Lawrence let out a strangled gasp. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning horror. It was the look of a man who had just realized he'd not only lost the game, but he'd been utterly outmaneuvered by the person he thought he could easily discard. "This is outrageous," he finally managed to stammer. "My career is already ruined. You're leaving me with nothing." I leaned forward, a small, knowing smile on my face. "Oh, Lawrence," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. "You're not left with nothing. You're left with the consequences of your choices, and a lot of free time to reflect on them." The legal battle was over, but the social consequences were just beginning. News travels fast in our suburban bubble, especially when it involves a prominent family and an HR scandal. Lawrence became a pariah. His former colleagues, even those who had initially felt sorry for him, now saw him as a cheat and a fraudster. His parents, who had initially tried to blame me for breaking up the family, quickly changed their tune when they realized their son was facing potential legal action for financial misconduct. They were more concerned about their reputation at the country club than their son's moral compass. Brenda, I heard, had been quietly let go from her remote position. Her career in HR was effectively over. It seemed her client relationships had finally caught up with her. Poetic justice, indeed. The house, our home, was now truly mine. I didn't feel triumphant, not in a gloating way, more like a profound sense of relief. It was a space for my children to feel safe, a foundation for our new beginning. I started redecorating, painting over the beige walls Lawrence had insisted on, infusing the house with my own personality. It felt like shedding an old skin. One afternoon, I was at Home Depot, picking out new paint samples, when I bumped into a former colleague of Lawrence's. He looked uncomfortable, but I smiled. "Hey, April," he mumbled. "Heard things have been interesting." "Oh, you have no idea," I replied, grabbing a can of serene ocean blue. "But hey, at least I got a great story out of it. And a house." I winked. He actually laughed. The kids adjusted remarkably well. John, now almost 13, was busy with middle school and his friends, occasionally asking about his dad, but mostly focused on his own life. Olivia, 10, is a budding artist, her room covered in colorful drawings that are infinitely more interesting than any corporate flowchart Lawrence ever produced. They've adapted with a resilience that frankly puts most adults to shame. They see their dad, but they also see a mom who stood up for herself, who rebuilt her life, and who, most importantly, still makes killer homemade cookies. Lawrence, I heard, had moved into a small apartment downtown. He was struggling to find new employment, his reputation preceding him. The senior account manager title now came with a giant asterisk. He tried to see the kids, but his visits were awkward, strained. He was a shadow of his former self, a man stripped of his carefully constructed facade. The revenge wasn't a sudden, explosive moment. It was a slow, deliberate dismantling, a poetic justice that unfolded over months. It wasn't about making him suffer for suffering's sake. It was about ensuring that his actions had real, tangible consequences. And they did. He lost his wife, his family home, his financial security, and his professional standing, all because of a few ill-advised emails and a secret Poconos weekend. I looked at the paint swatches in my hand, thinking about the vibrant new colors I was bringing into my life. The past was behind me, A messy, chaotic chapter I had closed with a satisfying thud. The future was bright, open, and entirely mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, wonderfully free. It's been over a year since the great email bomb of 2024 detonated, and let me tell you, the fallout has been surprisingly liberating. My life, once a meticulously curated suburban tableau, is now a vibrant, slightly chaotic masterpiece of my own making. The house, once a monument to Lawrence's beige sensibilities, is now a kaleidoscope of colors, reflecting the new, bolder me. The kitchen, where I discovered the betrayal, now hums with laughter and the aroma of actual delicious food, not just joy-free casseroles. Lawrence? Well, let's just say his digital transformation was more of a digital implosion. He's still in that tiny downtown apartment, occasionally sending me frantic emails about child support payments being too high, which I promptly forward to Mr. Henderson. His career is, shall we say, in a permanent state of administrative leave. I heard he tried to get a job at a car dealership, but even they apparently did a background check. Turns out, being known as the guy who cheated on his wife with HR and tried to hide money offshore isn't a great selling point for pre-owned sedans. Brenda from HR? She's apparently moved to a small town in Ohio, working as a freelance consultant for workplace ethics. The irony is so thick, you could spread it on a bagel. I almost sent her a congratulatory fruit basket, but then I remembered my budget for sarcasm was limited. The kids are thriving. John, now almost 13, is navigating the treacherous waters of high school applications, completely unfazed by the parental drama. He's even started taking an interest in coding, which I secretly hope will lead him to develop an app that flags suspicious HR emails. Olivia, 11, is a budding artist, her room covered in colorful drawings that are infinitely more interesting than any corporate flowchart Lawrence ever produced. They've adapted with a resilience that frankly puts most adults to shame. They see their dad, but they also see a mom who stood up for herself, who rebuilt her life, and who, most importantly, still makes killer homemade cookies. As for me, April Dorsey, I've re-entered the workforce not as an employee, but as the founder of Phoenix Rising Marketing Solutions. Catchy, right? I specialize in helping small businesses craft their brand narratives. And yes, I occasionally throw in a pro bono consultation for women navigating their own digital transformations. My expertise in strategic exposure has proven surprisingly valuable. Who knew a cheating husband could be such a great business catalyst? I've learned a few things over the past year. First, never underestimate a woman with a laptop and a clear sense of injustice. Second, karma isn't just a concept. It's a meticulously organized spreadsheet with an impressive reply-all function. And third, sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the greatest liberations. I used to think my identity was tied to being Lawrence Dorsey's wife. Now I'm just April. April Dorsey, who runs her own business, raises 2 amazing kids, and occasionally enjoys a glass of wine on her patio, watching the sunset over her very own, very colorful, very much her house. The whole ordeal was a brutal, hilarious, and ultimately empowering journey. It was a reminder that even when your world implodes, you have the power to rebuild it, piece by sarcastic piece. You can turn your personal tragedy into a stand-up routine, your heartbreak into a business plan, and your ex-husband's infidelity into a cautionary tale for the ages. So, if you ever find yourself staring at a suspicious email, a Poconos receipt, or a trust fund for a future dependent, remember this: you're not a victim. You're a strategist. You're a storyteller. And you have the power to write your own ending. Just make sure it's a viral one. You know, I often tell Sarah over brunch, some people get a midlife crisis. I got a midlife revelation. And honestly, it was way cheaper than a sports car. And that, my friends, is the story of how I cleaned out my inbox. And in doing so, cleaned out my life. Turns out the best way to deal with a train wreck is to be the one driving it.